Just to let you know, this episode talks about Unstoppable, and the film features themes of domestic abuse. Welcome to Filmability. My name is Joel Fisher. I'm the author of Filmability, a history of disability in cinema, and this is a podcast all about disability in cinema. Welcome back if you joined me before, and welcome if this is your first time. Let me know how I'm doing and what films you would like me to cover. As always, I will be talking about movies that have main or pivotal supporting characters that have disabilities. And this week's movie is Unstoppable, the biopic of Anthony Robles, a one-legged wrestler who won the NCAA Individual National Wrestling Championship of 2011. It's directed by William Goldenberg, his directorial debut, but he is an experienced editor on films such as Heat, Ali, the Muhammad Ali biopic with Will Smith, National Treasure, and Zero Dark 30. And also he has edited Ben Affleck's directorial movies such as Gone Baby Gone and Argo. Basically, he knows how to tell a story. The film's also based on the book Unstoppable, From Underdog to Undefeated, How I Became a Champion by Anthony Robles. I advise you to watch the movie if you were to continue listening to the podcast, because I'll be going through the plot and basically everything about it and picking up on the moments that are particularly about disability. You can find it, buy it, rent it, wherever you want. And if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, then it is free. So without further ado, here we go. So the movie starts with Anthony watching TV. There are various sports people on there talking about how winning is everything. You've got to be the best. You've got to really go for it if you want to succeed. Everything about this is setting up the audience to tell them that determination and perseverance are the things that make him who he is. We cut to a wrestling match. Anthony is psyching himself up, and the coach, Bob Williams, played by Michael Pena, tells him to focus, and the camera cuts to a wider shot, showing the audience that Anthony only has one leg. His mother Judy, played by Jennifer Lopez, is in the audience, and as the camera moves around, a couple of the audience members, a couple of high school girls, start talking about him having one leg and saying that it's a joke and they don't really understand why he's there. Judy leans over and unexpectedly and intimidates them because of what they said and that she is proud of her son. Anthony then goes on to win the match, and his mother turns to the girls, giving them an evil stare. And the girls are cheering enthusiastically because of the great win that Judy Robles' son has achieved. Although when you go down to Anthony, it looks like he feels like he's alone because there's nobody else there to congratulate him. His mum's in the audience, his coach has gone off, and he feels like it's him and against the world. Later on in the formal dinner, Anthony's on his crutches, and one of the waiters tells him how great he was and how he should join the WWE, and suggests that he should be some kind of peg-leg pirate character. And Anthony reassures him that he is going to finish school and money isn't what drives him. He's basically just being very polite to a person who doesn't really understand what Anthony does, and also is kind of ableist with the way that he treats him. It's the kind of thing we have to do, unfortunately. As ableism is so ingrained in society, whenever somebody makes an off-colour joke that they think is meant to be a bonding moment with a disabled person, that person just has to shake it on the chin. What we may be really thinking when you talk to us and don't really know how to behave is that we've heard the same jokes over and over again. Although we do understand that it's probably because you don't really talk to disabled people that often, if at all, and you may think there's a certain way to do it. I can tell you that immediately highlighting somebody's disability is not the way to do it. Not that we don't do it ourselves though. Even some disabled people have some innate awkwardness around other disabled people, and it seems to be because we just don't see each other very often. Disability is so invisible in society that somebody with a limb difference could be a wheelchair user, and there may be some certain preconceptions that come into the mind of either one of them. purely because they haven't met somebody like them before. Instead, we need to realise that disabled people are just the same as everybody else, and the preconceptions of what you think we may be like are actually wrong. It's not your fault. As I say, it's ingrained in society, but before you decide to talk to a disabled person, perhaps consider that they may want to talk about common interests and everyday things, rather than pointing out the person you're talking to is disabled. Although personally, I hate small talk altogether, so only talk to me if you really have to. So after dealing with the well-meaning ableist, Coach Williams introduces Anthony to a man who can help him improve his career and his education at a school in Iowa. Anthony politely thanks the man, but he looks reluctant for the help. It sort of feels like Anthony wants to do everything by himself, and he's never relied on charity. Anthony goes home in a taxi with Judy, and she opens the door, and his siblings are all there waiting, and they loudly congratulate him as he goes through the door. It's shown that they all have a great relationship with him. His stepdad Rick, played by Bobby Cannavale, comes through the door and sits at the table. He starts to talk to Anthony about his wrestling and reminds him how important school is. There's clearly a lot of tension between them, and Anthony's mum stands up for him, objecting to the way that he's been talked to by Rick. In the next scene, Coach Williams brings Anthony into his office to talk to him about the offer and how he should take it. It's clearly Anthony is still undecided. Then we go to Anthony working at an airport, and he's standing on the wing of a plane, which is hard enough to do for people with two legs, let alone one. He's talking to a co-worker, Eddie, played by Kelty Williamson, and he's telling him he should slow down and take it easy. Then at home, Judy tells Anthony that she needs him to be home for his siblings, but Anthony says that the coach will lead him after school, and she reluctantly agrees because she knows how important it is to him. Anthony waves to a friend called Manny across the street, and Judy warns him about people like that, but it seems that Anthony doesn't listen to her. Although, to be honest, this isn't really ever brought up. It's more about how Anthony has many different choices, and he could very easily go down the wrong path. At school in the gym, the coach of the wrestling team, Sean Charles, played by Don Cheadle, comes in to shake Anthony's hand. Sean tells him a story about a man who broke his leg, and tells him that his path in the sport may be difficult because he has just one leg himself, and not to get his hopes up. Sean Charles' character is shown to be immediately sceptical about Anthony's ability, but thankfully, down to John Cheadle's performance, he's never seen as a moustache-twirling villain who wants Anthony to fail. At home, Anthony comes to make dinner. Ricky's sitting at the table again, and there is more tension between them. Judy comes home and overhears the overbearing behaviour, and she tries to talk up Anthony, but Rick shuts her up, spouting some nonsense about people in prison only get what they deserve. And considering it's America, there's probably a lot of prisoners that shouldn't be there, and they're just there because of various other reasons that I won't get into right now. Then one of the smallest children has Rick's phone, and she apologises as he coldly snatches it away and leaving the house. And as soon as he left the house, Judy goes back into mother mode. She's lovely, she's warm, she's caring, and it's as if Rick doesn't exist. And that's further emphasised by the fact that at the end of the scene, he's just there, standing outside, while the rest of the family are getting on, implying that he doesn't really understand them. Back at the airport in a hangar, Anthony's reconsidering his offer to Iowa. He's talking to his same friend who encourages him to make the decision that makes more sense. Basically, work hard and really don't get anywhere at all, or take the good offer. Back home, Judy is cleaning up a mess. Anthony is concerned, but she says everything is fine. But Anthony doesn't believe her, especially as Rick has made a hole in the wall. And unfortunately, as she breaks down, she tells Anthony that Rick got angry, and she starts to cry as she says that he's left her. Back at home in the gym, Sean gathers the group of workers together and gives them a stern talking to about how many of them won't make it. It's a tough love, inspiring speech leading them to a training montage. They're on a track outside, running, and Sean sees Anthony take off his shirt and tie a weight to it to show that he can make it harder for himself, but also succeed. However, Sean is still giving the impression that he doesn't think Anthony can make it. And there's the thing with being a disabled person. Often when you're applying for a job or just talking to people in general, there can be certain assumptions made about you because of your disability, and so it can often feel like you may need to prove yourself. This goes back again to what disabled people have to face every day, and as Anthony Robles says in Unstoppable, he thinks about how people say that there's something missing in him because he only has one leg, and then it drives him to think that he has to make a name for himself. Although this may not be explicitly stated in the movie, the way that disabled people are treated, whether it's well-meaning or misjudged humour or people just staring at you in the street, it can have effects on your well-being. Anthony Robles took that attitude from other people and used it to drive him to succeed and to achieve something seemingly impossible, and although channeling it in a positive way is good and can help people's perceptions, other times it feels like there's not a lot else you can do. Occasionally somebody will see a disabled person and say, "I don't know how you do it. I couldn't do what you do if I was in your position." And in their heads, I'm sure it's meant to be a positive affirmation that the disabled person they met is doing the right thing. However, it comes across as the person saying that they'd rather be dead than disabled. The fact that any disabled person is seen in public doing anything at all, and that is seen as a remarkable achievement, is part of what's really wrong with the way disabled people are seen. Too often we have to shout to make ourselves heard, and that doesn't mean we won't stop shouting, but every now and then it may be nice if we could just relax and have a good time. Okay, let's go back to the movie. In the locker room, a wrestler congratulates Anthony, making him feel more part of the team. He's been accepted by his teammates, but his coach doesn't accept him just quite yet. Later in the gym, Sean says he wants to work on balance, the implication for the audience being that Anthony will have more trouble because he can only use one leg. However, Anthony goes on to win a match, eliminating another wrestler from the team. Then back at school, Coach Williams is telling Anthony that he needs to believe in himself and work hard, reminding him that he had a point to prove to be successful. And as I've said, I've already gone through that about that, but that's really hammering home the point of the movie. Anthony then goes on a hiking trail, the difficulty of which is shown by a sign which is saying that it is extremely difficult. I mean, I don't think that's necessary to emphasise that, but it does that nonetheless. He continues despite seeing how difficult the trail would be, and he just stumbled a little bit as he's climbing further up the path. And then a bus arrives with the rest of the team, showing that Anthony wants to get the head start, but he fails again, and the team go past him even after he refuses their help. Sean says he is surprised to see Anthony there at all. Anthony tells his coach that he shouldn't be surprised, further emphasising how little faith Sean has in him. So then we see Anthony continue to struggle up the path, and as his team finish, they're waiting for him, and he comes over the hill and finishes with the rest of them, all to the rousing music of the score. And Sean is finally impressed and can't believe that he made it. Back at home, Rick has arrived and him and his mother are being internet in the kitchen. Anthony is surprised and disappointed to see that he's returned. Rick said that he apologised like a real man should, and although Anthony doesn't say anything, it's clear that he doesn't believe him and that he's worried about his mum. Then we get a family playing a card game without Anthony, and they all look like having a good time, while Anthony's elsewhere, he's training, and he still looks angry that Rick has returned. He can't get it out of his head. And they cut to a flashback where Anthony is a child in a car, and Rick tells him that he's not his dad, basically enforcing that he'll treat him differently to the rest of the other kids. Then back at home in the present day, the family are having dinner, and Anthony says that he needs to have a match, and that he'll be wrestling with a teammate. Rick says that they should all go watch because he believes that you have to fight everybody to survive. However, the implication is that he wants to be there because he knows that he can get into Anthony's head and then put pressure on him. And he's right. And even as he talks about how he was to come and support Anthony, Rick does make a jibe about Anthony's wrestling, and you can see that it's further getting into his head and making him doubt himself. And now, next scene, Anthony is with his little brother, and it's a really sweet scene. It's really nice. His little brother tells him that he thinks he's going to win, but he also wishes that he had one leg like him as well, so he could be strong like him. But Anthony reassures him that he could be just as strong with both legs. At the wrestling match, Anthony is struggling to win, and as he's counted out, he can't help but think about how Rick looks down on him. And as he looks over to Rick has a disappointed look on his face, as he kind of expected this to happen. Then at home, Rick says that Anthony can stop wrestling now after he's lost, and that really triggers Anthony, and he gets angry, confronting him, and reveals that Rick only came back because he got fired, and thought that if he made up with Judy that he could live off her for a while. The argument gets worse between them, but Judy stands up for Anthony, but then Rick puts her down and makes her feel small, leaving Anthony defenseless, and he ends up going back to his room. At school, Anthony is talking to Sean to explain his poor performance, which is due to the pressure he felt from being judged by Rick. Sean tells him that he needs to get his head into the game because he's his own worst enemy and he shouldn't let people get to him. Although because his stats are higher than his opponent, he still made the wrestling team despite losing to him. Anthony goes home and to tell his mum the good news, and he sees that she's been hit. She's still excited for Anthony, and she just tells him not to worry, but you can see that things are getting a lot worse. Then back at the wrestling team, Sean tells them that wrestling has been cut because of budgetary reasons. This is a thing that often happens when sports are not as popular as others, and Sean says he's upset because he feels he's let the team down, but encourages them to keep going with their schoolwork despite what happened. And this is where I should probably explain what happened between what happens in the movie and what happens in real life. In reality, ASU alumni Tom Ortiz was actually the coach at ASU when Anthony was a walk-on and had to be persuaded by his coach at school to allow Anthony Robles to try out. Later, when ASU dropped their wrestling program, as it just happened in the film, as I explained, it was only temporary, and it was reinstated less than 2 weeks later. After that, when the program was reinstated, Coach Ortiz was fired, and then Sean Charles was hired on as a coach for the rest of the program. However, to have a character switch this late in the game as such would be a bit weird and jarring, so they just kept Sean Charles on, just so that they didn't confuse the audience. So back at home, Anthony tells his mum, and she's disappointed about the team, but Anthony brushes it off, saying that there are more important things to worry about. He says he can help the family make some money, and that the audience knows that he's still trying to live up to Rick's expectations. And we go to a year later, and Anthony drives home and finds a man outside the house with Judy and the family, telling them that they have 90 days to leave their home, as Rick hasn't been paying the mortgage. Judy's upset and clearly embarrassed that this happened, and her anger continues as she goes inside the house and starts to pack, finally realising that she has to do something about her relationship. Auntie says she needs to make a clean break from Rick, but then she breaks down crying as it feels so hard, considering the life that they'd shared together. Time passes and Anthony is at home. He blows his nose and throws it in the bin to find bloody bandages in there. And then he drives around and he finds Judy at a local blood drive, obviously giving blood in order to raise money for her family. The lengths that she's gone to are really worrying Anthony, and as they drive home, he looks disappointed and really worried for his mum. But this point then gives Judy a reason to fight for something. She suddenly realised how bad things have got, and so she starts to call various people and try to get help on the mortgage. At school, Anthony goes to see Sean, where he's told that the team has been downsized due to budget, and that Anthony's scholarship could be in jeopardy, basically meaning that as he's working to train to become an athlete, it also means that he's getting funding for school, so one hand washes the other in a way, and he can't do the wrestling, then he can't carry on in school. However, because of budgetary reasons, it seems that some people can get through scholarships and some people can't. And Sean tells Anthony that his entire team has voted to help Anthony to get the scholarship. And this leads to his entire team coming in to congratulate him. And it feels like things are looking up and they're getting better, and that Anthony has not only been accepted by his teammates but also by Sean. And it's a lovely uplifting scene, and it's thankfully not too cheesy. It's nice, but not in a patronising way. Then there's a montage of Anthony wrestling, doing schoolwork, and his mother is trying to sort out a mortgage. Judy then goes to a meeting with the man from the mortgage company and tells him that they shouldn't have been forcibly told to move because it's illegal, and she's filed for an extension on their mortgage. And this leads to the man looking very much like he's been caught out. Then back at training, Anthony is told that he has to come up against Matt McDonough, a real wrestler played by Johnny DeJulius in the movie, who was an actor himself, but actually was a wrestler at Ohio State. So this is very much the actor fitting the role. McDonough is seen as a formidable and successful wrestler in the circuit, and Anthony looks worried but brushes it off. At the tournament, Anthony is easily beating his opponent. He's given a pep talk to psych himself up to feel ready for fighting McDonough. Commentators build up the match as McDonough and Robles face each other, and Judy and Coach Williams are sitting in the crowd cheering Anthony on. And Anthony does struggle at first, but he gets a couple of wins against McDonough, although eventually McDonough does pin him down and Anthony loses the match. Coach Williams and Anthony are then later on sitting on the bleachers talking about why he lost, and he's told not to lose hope because the success doesn't come without loss. Anthony jokes that wrestling is the only sport he does because nobody else can run away. But then he starts to talk about how he feels about something is missing, relating to how other people see that there's something missing in him because of his leg, and he wants to make a name for himself. This again leads to something else in discrimination and being treated differently and feeling like you're having to prove yourself. It's a common thing with disabled people. Some people take it to heart, some people brush it off, or some people it drives them on. I'm not saying discrimination is a good thing at all, because when you're given no venues to go into, then you may feel like you're trapped. But if you can find something and make a go of it and make it successful, then I guess to some disabled people it would feel like they were winning against all the odds. It's a cliche of sports movies and a lot of movies where you see disabled people winning against the odds, but there is a little truth to it. Then we have another montage. Anthony is training hard, he's climbing ropes, he's lifting weights, he's doing push-ups, and after, Anthony drives home to find his siblings on the driveway, and they say that Rick has returned. Anthony finds Rick and Judy fighting, and it's getting violent once again, but this time it's much worse than it's ever been. Anthony threatens Rick and pins him down with using one of his wrestling moves. Judy calls the police, and she finally sees Anthony for the man that he is, and he might be capable of taking care of the family. And Rick is taken away by the police. Time passes, and Coach Williams comes over to see Anthony, but he's not there, and Judy answers the door, and it's a nice moment between them. He's nice to Judy and compliments her on raising such a good man, and there's an implication that we might see a bit of romance between them. I mean, I'm not sure that it happened in real life or if it added anything to the film, but it's a nice little moment. Anthony comes home and Judy shows him all the letters from the kids who have similar problems and how he's become a hero to them. She breaks down in tears, apologising for choosing to stay with Rick and for giving him such a hard life. However, this speech does slightly tip over into being over the top and corny, a bit overcooked. I think it's mainly down to Jennifer Lopez's performance, sadly. I mean, she kind of has a reputation of not being the best. There are definitely a lot of films that I've seen with Jennifer Lopez which I would not say are good. I mean, I chose to watch them, but I wouldn't say they were great, and often she's not really the best suited for the roles. However, I would say there's a film called Hustlers, which is about strippers in New York who do rob their clients, and she's really good in it. So, if you're going to watch any Jennifer Lopez movie, watch Hustlers. Anyway, that little side note. We go back to another tournament, and rousing music is playing, and Anthony wins his matches. Sean gets the crowd to cheer for him, and Anthony prepares to face McDonough once again. Although backstage he's watching TV where the commentators are doubting his ability, they're still putting him down, thinking that a disabled man is not fully capable of doing what everybody else does. And it even goes as far as seeing the other coaches from the teams trash talking him and what he can do or can't do. And Sean reassures him that he shouldn't let it get to him. And then we come to the sort of climax. We're working towards the climax because this tournament is set in Philadelphia, the same place that Rocky is set. And this is reflected on the poster of Rocky that Anthony's had on his wall since the beginning of the movie. So he goes up into the street and up the steps, those famous steps that Rocky climbs up to and does his little punch in the air and spin around. The music goes around anyway. And something that I didn't know was that at the top of those stairs there's a set of Rocky's footprints. And this is a great little moment because Anthony's feeling the best he can feel. He's top of his game. So he goes over to the footprints, puts his foot down, and takes a picture. It's a nice little social media bit, it shows the world that he's ready and that he's capable and that he's not going to let anything get in his way, The audience are definitely rooting for him at this point. And then we finally get to where Anthony's facing McDonough for the final time, and the match is really tense. It looks like he's being beaten. There's a woman in the crowd screaming to break his leg, and Anthony's mother looks aggressively towards her, as you would do. The match continues, and Anthony looks like he's having a difficult time, but he beats McDonough in the final minutes in a slow-motion finale. A small montage of Anthony's friends and families and siblings cheering him on, and his mother comes out to hug him, and the rousing music continues. This is the Rocky moment. This is the point where the audience gets up out of their seats and cheers and claps, and like everybody else. It's a really good moment. And the final scene shows a museum of sport, and although the events of the movie ended at 2011, this is the present day, and Anthony is in the museum himself. He has pictures up there of his achievements, and he's really been shown as a figure to look up to have people see what you can achieve, not because of Anthony's disability, but because of how hard he can work to get to what he wanted to do. And as typical biopics normally end, there is a few lines of text with pictures of the real Anthony and his family and friends, showing his achievements of being a wrestling analyst on ESPN and other achievements, such as Anthony Robles being the first athlete to be signed to Nike after retiring from sport, his work as a motivational speaker, and in 2011 he won the Jimmy Valvano ESPY Award for Perseverance. And in 2012 he joined ESPN as an NCAA wrestling analyst. Also in 2013, President Obama appointed Anthony to the President's Council on Fitness, Sports and Nutrition. In 2022, Anthony took over as wrestling coach at Mesa High School. Also, Judy Robles gets a mention as well at the end of the film, as she graduated from Arizona State University in 2014. In 2022, she earned a doctorate in education, and she's currently known as Dr. Judy Robles, and currently the Assistant Dean of the ASU. So there we go, that's Unstoppable, and with a few of my thoughts put in about the context of the film, I hope it can give you a better understanding of how it relates to disability, and not just because the lead character is disabled and it's based on a true story. In 2025, we've nearly got to the point where stories like this can be told, and it feels as naturally played as any other movie in the genre. As I mentioned earlier, Jharrel Jerome, a non-disabled actor, still plays Anthony Robles. However, the real Anthony Robles does double Jerome for the wrestling matches. Not bad for a man whose heyday was in 2011. Unstoppable shows that even in a biopic, a real disabled person doesn't need to be sidelined to highlight how well a non-disabled actor can play the role. However, this is a sports movie, and although it does wear its influences on its sleeve, this is where I feel it may be lacking in the movie. Besides Anthony's personal life, there really isn't much else there to encourage the audience to support him, and his story could be the same as any other athlete. I would go as far as to say that Anthony's life outside of the mat are highlighted more to pad out in the movie. Things such as the slight implication that Anthony might, albeit briefly, go on the wrong side of the tracks, and Judy Robles' struggle with her mortgage company could easily have made it to the cutting room floor, and it wouldn't have made a difference to the story. If you do like a sports movie though, and simply have to watch every other sports movie biopic that's ever been made, then Unstoppable gives you everything you would ever need. However, for a casual audience who may be expecting something a little different and emotive in a sports movie, then Unstoppable may leave them wanting more. And seeing that director William Goldenberg is more famous as an editor than a director, it's a little surprising how much of Anthony's personal life was left in the movie. It may be important to document everything in a person's life to get a fully rounded idea of who they are. But Mrs. Robles' financial struggles could have been very much in the background, and even the scene where Anthony finds her giving blood to raise money could have been implied rather than outright spelled out. They say it's better to show and not tell, but at times inclusions like that make the story feel a little heavy-handed. Okay, so on to the trivia section, and I think this week, because there's no trivia really because the film is relatively recent and there's nothing I've already talked about, I thought I would talk about Anthony Robles and try to explain why he got to where he got to and how good of an athlete he actually was. So here we go. Despite his high school success, Robles was rejected by his top choices of Iowa, Oklahoma State and Cornell. This led him to redshirt in 2006, meaning that it was a delay or suspension of an athlete's participation in order to lengthen their period of eligibility as a freshman at university. The way this works is the student athletes may attend classes at their college or university whilst they're practicing with an athletic team. But they are wearing the team uniform to play, but they may only do so in a limited number of games. Robles then went on to finish 6th in the 2006 FILA Junior World Championship in the 55kg freestyle wrestling category. He started his collegiate wrestling career in 2007 to 2008, where he was nationally ranked and finished the year with a record of 25-11. That's 25 wins, 11 losses, falling just short of being named an All-American. In this area, this sports, an All-American is meaning that he would have to place in the top 6 or 8 at the national championship tournament to give the title. Basically, he just missed out on being considered among the best of the best. In his second competitive year as a collegiate wrestler, 2008 to 2009, Robles earned All-American honours, finishing the year 29-8, finishing the Pacific 10 Conference Championship at 125 pounds and finishing 4th in the NCAA Championships 125 pound weight class tournament. In 2009-2010, Robles again earned All-American honours, finishing 7th in the NCAA £125 weight class, going 32-4 on the season, and repeating as the Pac-10 £125 wrestling champion. In Robles' final year of eligibility from 2010 to 2011, he went undefeated, going 36-0 on the year, becoming a 3-time Pac-10 champion, defeating Jason Lara from Oregon State in the final, and a national champion, defeating the defending £125 NCAA champion Iowa's Mac McDonough, as is mentioned in the film. He went 7-1 in the final, and for his efforts, Robles was voted the tournament's most outstanding wrestler. The 5'8" Robles concluded his Arizona State wrestling career with a record of 122-23, a 3-time Pac-10 wrestling champion, as well as a 3-time All-American. Robles ranks 8th for most match wins by an Arizona State wrestler. So, basically, in summary, he was outstanding, not only for an disabled athlete, but in general. He has definitely earned his titles and his scholarship and everything that came to him. Thanks for listening. Next week I'll be talking about Don't Breathe, a horror movie from 2016 about a blind man whose house gets invaded by a trio of burglars, but little do they know that he has a particular set of skills to handle them. If you'd like to contact me, you can do so by searching for film-ability at Bluesky, by searching for film_ability at Instagram, and if you'd like to email me, my address is film-ability@outlook.com. And if you'd like to make a contribution to the things that I do here, you can find me at Patreon at patreon.com/film-ability. You can also find my book at Amazon on Kindle and paperback called Film Ability, A History of Disability in Cinema. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.